Hey everybody, welcome to Cooking Things with Dakota. Today, we're going to learn how to half-bake a perfectly good game. So first we start with our box of fully formed ideas. This box contains multiple years of concept work and vision. Let's grease our pan with a quality track record that spans the past 2 console generations. Now mix a good team, a creative idea, and a fun combat system. Finally, we'll put it in the capable hands of Microsoft, only to see it pushed out moments later. And there you have it. What could have been a good game is now a hot, soupy mess. So close. British developer Rare has one of the most beloved back catalogs in all of gaming. Titles including Conker's Bad Fur Day, Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong Country, and many other games for Nintendo. However, in 2002, the studio was purchased by Microsoft for around $375 million. Most vocal fans of Rare are quick to dismiss any game from the studio post-buyout without having played them. These games really attempt to push the boundaries of game genres while retaining that classic Rare charm. Released in 2003 to mediocre reviews, Rare's first release post-buyout, grabbed by the Ghoulies, was quickly swept under the rug. Which is a real shame because it's a beat-em-up with innovative mechanics, and in such a formulaic genre, innovation is, well, sort of rare. What the hell?
No puns about the company's name.
It was an accident. The game is a pretty simple linear beat-em-up, but what sets it apart is its use of the right thumbstick for combat purposes. I'm always a fan of when games can make the experience more tactile. Like the Flick It control system in the Skate series, where you have to use all the buttons in various ways to pull off different tricks. Any system that utilizes multi-input moves automatically makes the experience more engaging. And it seems that Grab by the Ghoulies was going for just that, but unfortunately it fell short. You see, the dominant strategy in most situations is to wildly spin the control stick until all the enemies are defeated. It's the fastest and really the only way to clear some levels. There are weapons and power-ups, but there's no combo system. Now don't get me wrong, this mechanic is super responsive and makes the game fun to play, in short bursts. You see, the longer you play the game, the more you start to realize how shallow the system really is. Every level in the game is pretty much the same. You enter a room, you beat up some bad guys before you can advance. The game will throw obstacles into each room, things like don't destroy the furniture, use only your fists, only use weapons, etc. While some overlapping obstacles can pose interesting challenges, they tend to get really old really quick. If you fail to abide by the obstacles, then the Grim Reaper will come out and try to kill you. However, you can complete almost every challenge without worrying about the objectives because the Grim Reaper is rather slow, and outrunning him is about as easy as winning a marathon against Fat Albert. The game is separated into 5 total chapters, and those chapters are broken down into rooms. With the exception of the 4th chapter, which is a boss fight, there are 86 rooms spread out unevenly over 4 chapters. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well gee, cartoon mansions tend to have a lot of rooms, surely that justifies the 86 different sections. First off, don't call me Shirley, second off, it doesn't. The game has you backtracking through rooms 47 different times, meaning that over half of the rooms are repeats. This kind of backtracking is really only reserved for games like Metroid or Zelda, but it's a linear game. You go where the developers tell you to go. And it's Rare, so you'd think that they would make you go through a bunch of really creative rooms filled to the brim with detail. But instead, they make you go through the same rooms over and over again. The story follows 2 lovebirds who are caught in a storm and stumble upon a Victorian mansion, and seeing as how they're the protagonist and damsel, they're contractually obligated to enter. As Cooper and Amber enter the mansion, Amber is almost immediately captured. Without a moment to spare, your guide character shows up and... ba-da-da-da, he's a butler. That's right folks, the haunted house cliches are abundant, and the game only doubles down further. The aesthetic is like a mashup of Vincent Price, Scooby-Doo, and the Haunted Mansion at Disney. The ride, Evan, not the movie.
Is there a difference?
Yes. One is a classic part of the Disney experience, and the other is a classic part of Eddie Murphy's Downward Spiral. A majority of the story is spent trying to find Amber, who gets lost twice. This wouldn't be so bad if saving her didn't revolve around fetch quests. I actually kinda like this game, so I'm gonna use Evan's compliment sandwich to not completely destroy it.
Get your own segment.
I cleared this with you earlier, dude. What the? Where'd you get the second pie? Fine, I'll do something else. A lot of my issues with this game start to form an unpleasant combo that I really have no defense for.
Ready, fight!
I've already talked about the tedium with the level design and mission structure. Rare's voice acting is really one of the more defining features, replacing words with random sounds to emulate actual speech. This was sort of cute in games like Banjo-Kazooie, but it really doesn't work in this context. It just makes me want to skip the dialogue screens. Which isn't too much of a problem because the dialogue isn't too great either. Another generally beloved trope found in rare titles is the collectibles. I think there are two types, one being these books and the other being these kids that are locked up.
In the arms of the angel, fly away from here, from this dark.
I have issues with this. I think you can see. I think it's pretty evident. The kids aren't collectible until the final stage. More so, they're not freeable until the final stage. The collectible books are kind of neat. They've got the Rare logo on it. Oh hey, look, there's Banjo-Kazooie. Okay, we get it. You made some other games. Move on. The side characters are extremely weak. A kiddie pool has more depth than any of these people. My final note here is a very specific one. And when you play the game, if you play the game, you'll know what I mean, but this level is so frustrating. All these aspects lead to a game that just doesn't feel like older Rare titles. I can see where they're trying to innovate, but in this kind of genre, there's strict guidelines that you have to innovate around. Now, there are 4 crucial elements to a good beat-em-up game, that being pacing, enemy variety, aesthetic, and complexity of play. For comparison's sake, let's look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, as well as Grabbed by the Ghoulies. The first element required is pacing. As a developer, you should want to keep the player moving. You don't want them to get stuck in any one location. Keeping a fast pace makes the action feel fluid and tangible. Turtles in Time does this very well with having a few enemies per screen stop, no load times, and very little wait between levels. Ghoulies functions more like a puzzle game because of the obstacles. This, combined with frequent cutscenes and long load times between rooms, brings the pacing to a grinding halt. Next is enemy variety. Any good beat-em-up worth its salt needs a good selection of foes that have different abilities for the player to work around. I think this is the part where Grabbed by the Ghoulies really shines through. The different enemy types combine to provide a solid challenge in the area of combat, forcing the player to consider how different enemies will interact and what the best way to take them down is. Turtles in Time has enemies like this as well, but they're not nearly as visually appealing. However, that is comparing platforms that are 2 generations apart. Beat-em-ups require a focused aesthetic with good ambiance and great music to hide or at least justify the repetition that comes with the genre. Turtles in Time has a really great blend of cartoon looks and catchy music that brings you into the game. Likewise, Grabbed by the Ghoulies is very committed to a design that nails the old Scooby-Doo-like visuals, not to mention a solid soundtrack done by the legendary Grant Kirkhope. Finally, but most importantly, is complexity of play. A game of this nature needs to be accessible on 3 possible levels. It needs to be accessible for basic play, intermediate play, and for mastery. In Turtles in Time, the player can punch their way through every level without learning upper-tier techniques or exploits. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have people who speedrun this game. By utilizing upper-level techniques and exploits, they can move rapidly through every stage. Turtles in Time also offers intermediate play. That doesn't force the player to use all high-tier techniques, but they also don't brute force every level. By having all 3 of these different accessibility levels, Turtles in Time solidifies itself as not only a versatile game, but one with longevity. Ghoulies doesn't have that. While there are elements that add to the combat, there isn't anything that makes it deep. The system never reaches intermediate play. This isn't a setback, but rather a death blow. It's not a game that you're likely to get invested in or return to. It's clear that Grabbed by the Ghoulies is a game designed for a very young audience. Things like the simple playstyle, cartoon ambiance, light horror elements, and repetitive levels is great for a young or inexperienced player, but with a few more tweaks to the mechanics and an additional combo system, the experience could have been enhanced for players of all skill levels. So what we're left with is just sort of a half-baked game. Grabbed by the Ghoulies isn't a game that I'd pick up again. I'd like the ambition, yet loathe the execution. If you want to play this game, I would suggest getting Rare Replay because at least you get a few other games with it.